Hello and welcome to Miss Hannah Loves Grammar. In this video we'll be concentrating on the theme of ambition across the play Macbeth by William Shakespeare. So ambition, if we're defining it, is the desire to achieve or do something. And ambition is the fatal flaw of our tragic hero in this tragedy, Macbeth. Macbeth and Lady Macbeth try to fulfil their desires through murder, going against God and a society that fully accepted that God was in charge of your fate. You did not have free will. Ambition overwhelms Macbeth as the play unfolds and makes him paranoid and eventually a more controlling megalomaniac of things that he is unable to control, with a dependency on the witches. Lady Macbeth, once she begins to channel her feelings associated with her unethical actions, leads her to losing her mind. Perhaps Shakespeare is suggesting that unchecked ambition is cataclysmic. Perhaps he does this to please King James, who he knew would watch the King's Men, Shakespeare's troupe at the time. So contextually, as I've already mentioned, society believed in the divine right of kings, and at the time there'd even been a plot on King James's life, the Gunpowder Plot. So it's important that we see both Lady Macbeth and Macbeth, who defy God and the king, suffering for choosing free will against fate. So, in Act 1, Scene 3, Macbeth says, "If chance will have me, king, why chance may crown me." The repetition of chance echoes the idea of fate that Jacobean audience members would accept. They associated this with abiding by God's will for your life. He's wrestling with something. He defines it with, "will have me king." The desire for promotion to kingship is something that's clearly on his mind, but he knows it's something that should be on God's terms here, through the future tense will have, suggesting that Macbeth knows he should do nothing for this. And yet, when he says chance may crown me, the modal verb may signals that Macbeth understands it is not his free will to decide, yet there seems to be an excitement and fascination with being king when he says, "crown me." It's like he has a vision for that future before it's happened. So what does it suggest to us, and why does Shakespeare include it? Well, here we can see that Macbeth is trying to manage the exciting news that he's got from the Weird Sisters in Act 1, already in Act 1, Scene 1, and he knows the divine right of kings is more powerful by navigating his faith and fate. So ultimately, it's a reminder for us that he knows the constraints he should be held down by. He knows should not be in control. And yet, in Act 1, Scene 4, Macbeth says, "Stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires." He's calling upon the stars here, and there's an imperative mood by calling them to draw out his ambition as if it's fires. He's desiring for his ambition to be kept hidden. He's pleading so that his ambition would not be exposed when he says, "let not light." And accentuates his shame at knowing his free will desires are wrong and immoral. But more importantly, when it says, "my black and deep desires," the corruption is evident. Through the possessive pronoun my, used alongside the adjectives black and deep, the images associated with something that's black and deep conjure the sinister and alarming realisation that we know too as audience members, that Macbeth will struggle waiting for fate. The alliteration also of deep desires heightens the urge that he has for more power. It's as if he can't control that desire at this point. And what does it suggest to us as the audience? Well, for a start, he's commanding the sky, the stars. But perhaps Shakespeare presents this particular moment before Act 1, Scene 5, where Lady Macbeth is introduced to us, and she reveals her view on her husband being too full of the milk of human kindness. Here, before she is introduced, we learn Macbeth is already battling his conscience. He is struggling with something about what he should do before any ideas are placed in his head. In Act 1, Scene 7, Macbeth says, "I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition which overleaps itself and falls on the other." When he says, "I have no spur to prick," what he's highlighting is that he has no real motivation for killing Duncan. When he's talking about the act of pricking the sides of his intent, he's suggesting that nothing is motivating him but really his own blind ambition. And when he says, "my intent," the possessive pronouns here show his rationale to do this deed is about his own desire, rather than getting rid of a poor monarch. That vaulting ambition idea is as if his sole guide is his desire to succeed. Vaulting in itself suggests there is this huge distance he wishes to travel for his own goals, and we know that that is the case because he's defying what God has placed him to do. The metaphor is extended with the vaulting ambition, with the metaphor being continued where it overleaps itself. And it's heightened further to illustrate that Macbeth is prepared to go beyond his limits and land, as he says, to fall on the other side. It's as if he hasn't really thought through the true destination of what will happen aside from getting rid of Duncan. So what does this suggest to us as the audience? Well, there's definitely an intense sense of conflict that's still ongoing in Act 1, Scene 7, in knowing that he probably must kill, but knowing that his rationale is nothing more than selfish and not well thought through. The audience can spot at this stage that the logic is broken for Macbeth and his actions are definitely not honourable. But it's important to realise that as we move into Act 2, we know he will commit this deed. So as we move gallantly through to Act 3, Scene 1, this short quote highlights how the ambitions that Macbeth has come at a huge price of his insecurity. When he says, "To be thus is nothing but to be safely thus." And what he's saying, really, if I were to translate it, is to be king is nothing but to be safely king, really. And when he's saying to be thus is nothing, we are really permeating through these words, understanding and unlocking the insecurity, with nothing illustrating his yearning to feel his power is real, not as always under threat, masked by his poor mindset and actions in getting to the job he has as king. The adverb safely in safely thus signals how much Macbeth fears his place as king. Perhaps this is owing to his guilt in his actions, but perhaps this is also because he knows he's not just going to give up with the murder of Duncan. He's now seeking out to get rid of Banquo and his son, Fleance. So what does this suggest to the audience? To Jacobean and modern audience, it's a clear reminder that you shouldn't commit regicide or treason. But perhaps it's also a reminder that you can't escape the sense that your ambition will drive you to destruction. Unless you have gone about things ethically, there is no limit that you will put in place to what is acceptable of your actions. Once you cross that line, it's as if you can't go back. Our final quote on ambition is actually rather early in the play, Act 3, Scene 4. But it's a huge turning point. This is the scene where Banquo's ghost has arrived. It's a manifestation of guilt, but it's a reminder for Macbeth that his ambition is his driver, and he will not let go of this. He says, "For mine own good, all causes shall give way." That's a key change in his priorities. He states, using the possessive pronoun mine, that his own safety is the most important thing to him. When he says all causes shall give way, the reality that nothing is more important than his own security definitely amplifies the sense that his insecurity and paranoia at the banquet in this scene are beyond the realms of possibility. He has humiliated himself, even if he's not fully aware of it. And in some versions of this play, he fits at this point. But what does it suggest to us as the audience? Perhaps that the aftermath of achieving his ambition by any means has made Macbeth completely self-obsessed. He no longer echoes the adjective connotations we have of him as the brave Macbeth that we knew in Act 1. I wonder if Shakespeare's main intention by showing Macbeth's fall from grace through his devouring attitude of ambition is to show that if you have no moral compass in the way you seek out your actions, you will pay, at least in the Jacobean society with which Shakespeare is writing this play and wanting it to be performed, he is signalling that to defy God, to defy the king, to commit regicide, that ambition is never acceptable. It's important, though, also to note that the promotion that Macbeth gets, no matter how small this detail is, it still resonates with me. His promotion from Thane of Glamis to Thane of Cawdor, there's a poison chalice mindset about Cawdor. The last Thane of Cawdor was a traitor. And so that promotion is laden with all sorts of connotations of, well, this Thane of Cawdor that becomes the king, Macbeth, was also a traitor. The other thing to say that is woven with ambition is the fact that Macbeth's ambitions stem from the superstitious world of the witches, and the weird sisters are his crutch. At this point in the play, in this quote anyway, in Act 3, Scene 4, Macbeth will go back to the witches and seek more desperately what his ambitions will be next, and he will not relent until he has a very pathetic, lame death at the end of the play. It's worth considering that if you're going to succeed in any essay, it's not simply about quotations, it's also about pivotal moments. So refreshing yourself of what you see as the most fundamental moments of ambition in this play is probably the key to nailing it in any kind of exam. Why not subscribe to Miss Hannah Loves Grammar for all things English, literary and grammatical?